What's up, everyone? This is Zach with Top Deck Nation coming at you today with another deck profile video. Now, recently we've been covering a lot of the decks that have done well at US National Championships and Japan, just different national championships, so be sure to check those out. But today we're going to be looking at a deck that is, I don't know if I would call it competitive, but definitely a nice, fun budget deck, and that's going to be Wobbuffet BREAK and Bats. So if you haven't checked out my last video, I think it was maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago or something, I did do a budget deck and it was Meowstic EX Bats, so check that out. The concept is really similar here. You're attacking with Wobbuffet, you're taking advantage of, Dimension Valley to attack for 1 energy, and then you've got Bats to kind of supplement that damage. Well, recently, in the last few months, Pokemon has released, various break boxes. And what I mean by this is, these boxes that will include like so many booster packs, and they'll come with like these promo Pokemon breaks. So breaks that you can't really find in the packs. So, for example, like in Breakpoint, like in that set, you have things like Greninja Break and Trevenant Break, but in, these boxes, you might find something like Ho-Oh Break or Lugia Break or maybe not Lugia Break, but Wobbuffet Break, things like that. So, I think it's just a nice way to kind of squeeze in some of those fan favorites without having to put them in the set. So it leaves a little bit of room in the actual sets for more playable cards maybe. But the star of the deck, well, I should reiterate the new card of the deck, maybe not the star so much, is going to be Wobbuffet Break. It's the new addition for this deck. It's a really pretty card. I like how the breaks are just golden. They've got the gold border and the electricity. It's pretty cool. But it has this attack. It's called Right Back at You. It's really interesting. It says you discard all energy attached to this Pokemon, and during your opponent's next turn, if it were to take damage by an attack, you're going to put that much damage on the opposing Pokemon. So even if Wobbuffet's knocked out, let's say that something does 150 damage to Wobbuffet. So it's going to put 150 damage on the opponent's active Pokemon regardless. So really interesting attack, and keep in mind it's only going to cost you 1 energy to attack, so having to discard the energy is not that bad. The biggest issue is going to be having your opponent actually attack you to make it happen. So you would have to have some kind of instance where you're kind of forcing them to attack, maybe to get a prize or something like that. Otherwise, it is kind of easy to just kind of avoid it. I mean, it's really similar, kind of like Burst Balloon, which you also play in this deck. If you're not familiar with Bursting Balloon, it's the same kind of premise. Very similar to Wobbuffet Break, actually. You put it on your active Pokemon. If they get damaged, then your opponent takes 60 damage. So, in many ways, Bursting Balloon is kind of like the same concept. I mean, it makes me kind of wonder why they made Wobbuffet Break, but again, it is going to be fan service. It kind of confirms that Bursting Balloon, things like that, has some obvious synergy with Wobbuffet. Maybe that's what the card developers intended it to be. But let me go ahead and walk you through this deck. We have Wobbuffet, and like I said, Wobbuffet's really the star of the deck. It's your main attacker, and mainly for that Bide Barricade ability. And Bide Barricade says that as long as Wobbuffet's your active Pokemon, then every Pokemon in play, in hand, and in the discard has no abilities. And that is a huge ability. That is awesome because it's going to be shutting off a lot of things. So like if your opponent lays down like a Shaman EX and uses setup, they can't do it. Bronzong has the Metal Link's ability to accelerate metal energy. They can't do it. I mean, there's just a list of, Pokemon that use these abilities to help you, further advance your strategy and hopefully beat your opponent that way. But Bide Barricade is going to shut it off. And then we have Psychic Assault. It does 10 damage plus 10 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So, basically you can just kind of tell the center strategy is all about damage counters and putting a bunch of damage counters on the board, things like that. And that's a lot of times that's what psychic Pokemon in this game do. So there seems to be kind of like a certain theme with each type, and I think Wobbuffet and other psychic attackers definitely fit that. We've already gone over the break, so I won't cover that, although it does have 140 HP, so really the only benefits of evolving Wobbuffet are going to be the plus 30 HP and then the additional attack. So that's the big reason I'm not playing more than 2 in here. I think Wobbuffet and Crobat and such by itself is already pretty sufficient. But the Wobbuffet's nice to have. You know, it can kind of mess up the math for your opponent. It puts them in tricky situations. So I put a couple in there. And then lastly, for our Crobat line, I play a 4-4-3 line. Biggest reason for this is that when I'm playing like a 4-3-3 or a 4-3-2 line, I find like really often that I prize something. I prize a Golbat or two, I prize a Crobat or two. So in my experience testing and with a lot of friends that play, you know, these bat decks, I think the consensus is 4-4-3 is what's needed. Now, if you drop to 4-3-3, that's perfectly fine, but I would definitely consider maybe adding like a second Super Rod or Sacred Ash just to make sure if stuff gets discarded, you can get it back easily. But Golbat has the sneaky bite ability, so when you play it, you can put 20 damage somewhere. So really good. Swoop across does 10 to everything. Probably won't use that a whole lot, but keep in mind that it will cost 0 energy to attack thanks to Dimension Valley. And then the retreat cost is free, so that's always a nice plus also. And then Crobat Surprise Bite, which is basically a stronger version of Sneaky Bite. When you play it down from your hand, it does 30 damage somewhere. So pretty good. And then Skill Dive does 30 also. So, you know, Crobat is actually a pretty decent secondary attacker. I know your focus is on Wobbuffet, but you might have a few instances where Crobat is actually doing a lot of work because Crobat has more HP. It's got resistance to fighting, which can help you out. It's got a different weakness. So, I mean, depending on the deck you're playing, it could be good. So that's going to cover our Pokemon, guys. As far as supporters, I decided to split it up this way. I'm playing 3 Sycamore just because, you know, discarding your hand, drawing 7 cards, really good, really explosive. But the only thing is, if I don't want to get rid of certain cards in my hand, I still need a way to kind of, you know, shuffle those back in and draw cards, and that's exactly what N does. And that's why I'm playing 3 in here. It lets each of you shuffle your hand into your deck and draw a card for each of your remaining prizes. So chances are you might go down in the prize exchange, you know, pretty early on. And basically what that means is that, you know, your opponent might take 2 or 3 prizes and you might only take, you know, 1 by the time they do that. So N is a great way for you to keep drawing cards and making your opponent draw less and less. And of course, it's also disrupting their hand. So if they're holding on to a certain card, you know, it's going to get rid of that and hopefully they won't draw into it. We're playing 2 Lysandre, so if you do manage to get just enough damage on something, you can Lysandre it up and knock it out. If your opponent's trying to stall and they have something that will be knocked out and they retreat it, again, that's going to let you Lysandre it up and get those cheap knockouts. So really good to have in here. And then we play 1 AZ. So AZ is very similar to Super Scoop Up. You put a card, you put a Pokemon into your hand, so that can mean you're active, your bench, whatever. And you have to discard all cards attached to it, but that's fine for the most part. I mean, the most we're going to have is like an energy on Wobbuffet, so that's cool. But, you know, the big reason we're using this is because it lets you kind of reuse your bat line. So, for example, the example I always bring up is that if there is a, let's say you have a Zubat, a Golbat, and a Crobat on the bench. Well, if you AZ the Crobat, suddenly I can lay down the Golbat on the Zubat and then the Crobat on the Golbat, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So basically, it just lets you kind of reuse the bats and open up some pretty interesting turns. So that's why I like that. And then we're just going to play 1 Xerosic. So there's a lot of decks that have been playing Special Energy, like Night March, Seismitoad decks, Darkrai, Giratina. This is really for that. So, I mean, if you're struggling against that kind of stuff, you know, you're just constantly going to be using Verse Seeker to reuse this. And hopefully that's going to help, especially against things like Night March. So that is why we play Xerosic, and it's also good to knock off tools as well, so keep that in mind. So that covers our supporters. As far as our stadium, of course, we're going to play 4 Dimension Valley, and it basically reduces the cost of Psychic Pokemon's attacks by 1 colorless. So pretty awesome because all of our bats, they attack for colorless. Wobbuffet, same thing. So basically you're attacking for either no energy or 1 energy, and that's really, really good, being able to attack right off the bat. And then as far as our items go, you know, pretty conventional line here. We have 4 Ultra Ball. That's going to let us search out and get our Pokemon. We're going to have 4 Trainers Mail just because that is going to let you, hopefully draw into trainers you need, such as items, but more importantly, supporters, because if you notice in here, we don't have a way to draw cards besides your supporters. We don't have things like Shaman EX because it would be shut off. We don't play Unown, things like that. So Trainers Mail is going to give us another out to hopefully draw into those cards. We're playing 4 Super Scoop Up because it has some synergy with Wobbuffet and Bats, being able to reuse those and deny prizes, things like that. So really good. And then we're going to play 4 Seeker, of course, lets you reuse your supporters. So really good, especially with things like Xerosic or, anything in general. AZ, those 1F supporters that you may not see the rest of the game otherwise. We're going to play a Megaphone. This kind of complements, Xerosic gives you another out to knock off tools, especially on things like Night March, where, they might offset your math with that Fighting Fury belt. We're going to play Super Rod. Now, I mean, you could swap this out for, Sacred Ash, but I think Super Rod is overall the better option. I do wish it would shuffle more Pokemon back in, but, the fact that it shuffles an energy makes it a lot stronger. And you can always play a second if you so choose. We're going to play 4 Bursting Balloon. And again, this is one of those things that kind of make the deck. It's kind of like the bread and butter along with, Wobbuffet's Bide Barricade ability. And we've already gone over this, but, it's going to put 60 damage on your opponent's Pokemon. And if you think about the math here, let's just think about it for a minute. So let's just say something hits you, okay? Like a Pokemon EX hits you. So they're going to take 60, okay? And then Golbat, you're going to use his sneaky bite ability to put 20 on whatever you want. So that's going to put your opponent at 80. And then because of Wobbuffet's attack, it's going to be 10 plus 80, which is 90. And so I know that's a lot of math, but basically that is enough to knock out a Pokemon EX, most of them. So that's why it's really good. A Bursting Balloon can just come out of nowhere and take, let you take a knockout next turn. So really good. So I've pretty much covered everything. And then the items, or the energy, I should say. I'm only playing 7 energy because we're only attacking with, attackers that attack for like 1 energy or 0 energy. Mystery Energy is great to retreat out Wobbuffet if it's about to get knocked out. And then, of course, Super Rod can kind of get those back in the deck. So that pretty much is the deck, guys. Wobbuffet Break. It's basically Wobbuffet Bats. Nothing has really changed all that much except the fact that you play Wobbuffet Break in it. If you can justify it in there, I would recommend it. I mean, try it out. Definitely. It's definitely fun, of course. If you're just building a fun deck, or you're a younger player and you like Wobbuffet, it's always cool to have those Pokemon Break in there. But in general, I mean, it is a fun deck. It has a lot going for it. It's actually pretty good against Night March, honestly. But I don't know how competitive it is. I don't really think you'll see it at like the World Championships, for example. But yeah, you never know. But be sure to subscribe. Be sure to comment. Like if you liked the video. Dislike it if you didn't. But I'll certainly have more videos in the future, so be sure to comment, let me know what kind of decks you want to see and what other kind of video content you want to see. If you think the channel is boring, let me know what I can do to make it better. But this has been Zach with Top Deck Nation, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.